Hello everybody, and welcome back. If it's your first time here with us today, welcome to you. If you've been here before, welcome back. And we have more Game of the Week action coming at you here from Jacksonville Chess for Charity. An exciting action tournament played this past Saturday. The game was time control, 20 minutes per side with a delay of 5 seconds. So quick time controls, not quite blitz, but fast enough to keep things moving. And the game that we have chosen for you comes from the final round of this tournament and was played on board number 3 between Mr. Charles Joseph Libretto V, our commonly known as Joe, one of our chess players who got to play white in this time, and playing against him was Vasanth M. Parthasarathi with the black pieces in this game. Both players had very good tournaments, and going into this final round, they were each sitting on 2.5 points, and the winner of this game would end up finishing in a third place finish for the tournament. So this was a very important game, a must-win game for both players to secure the place that they want and show up with a very nice finish. And let's go ahead and see how this game plays out. We see some very nice play from both players throughout the course of this game, and hopefully you're ready to go ahead and dive with me into the action. Well, Joe kicked things off with the move e4, and Vas came right back out with the Caro-Kann in this one, c6. The Caro is known for being a very sound opening, can be a very hard opening to crack. However, it does not mean that white is without active ideas, and let's see how things are handled. Knight to c3 is played first, a slight variation from the more common move order. More commonly, you see white take immediate central control with that d4, and black's idea is to contest that center with the move d5, of course. Well, knight c3 doesn't prevent black from playing d5 anyway, and Joe decided to respond to the d5 push with knight to f3. And one of the things about this move order that we see from white is that white is maintaining a little bit of flexibility. In the normal Caro, white comes out, takes that center immediately with e4 and d4, but by moving the knights out, playing this 2 knights attack instead, what white is doing is saying, I'm not entirely sure, or I'm not going to let you know whether I'm going to play this d4 push or not. Maybe I'll develop to d3. Maybe I'll be able to bring my bishop to c4 after some pawn trades. They're keeping things in the air a little bit, trying to maintain flexibility. Now, of course, one thing that this does allow is black could potentially play this move d4 here, right? Well, the idea is that after a move like d4, this pawn is going to be too far advanced, so white is sort of inviting black into playing this, sort of saying, hey, come on, I dare you to push this pawn all the way up to d4, where it's going to be getting too far into my camp, and it will become a target that I can make use of. So, rather than playing this push d4, Vas played the move d takes e4, and after knight takes e4 and knight to f6, we're very close to the main line of the Caro, with the main difference being that white has played knight f3 rather than d4, so a slight differentiation here. And one of the other things that by not playing d4 white has done is it gives Joe the option to, on this next move, play the move queen to e2, so defending the knight with the queen, allowing the queen to recapture in the center if this trade occurs, and if the pawn push d4 is played, then the queen is somewhat tied to the defense of this pawn. Yes, it's true this knight on f3 would defend it, but black could undermine that knight with ideas like bishop g4, so by having not pushed this pawn yet, white maintains the ability to play this style in the opening. Well, black continues with knight takes e4, and after queen takes e4, we see that white has brought the queen out very early. However, with the knight from g8 already gone, it's not so easy to immediately attack this queen. Moves like bishop f5, of course, would have to be prepared. Moves like f5 are a little bit weakening from black, so white gets a nice central queen early in the game here without really the potential for it being kicked around too much too fast just yet. Now, black says, you know what, if you're going to put your queen in the center, I am going to prepare to kick it around, and Vas plays the move knight to d7, preparing to bring this knight all the way over to f6. Remember, we said the g8 knight couldn't come there because it was already traded off. Well, we're just going to go ahead and dance the other knight over there. And here Joe deviates from some lines that we've seen before. This is a position that has been played around 50 times or so in some master play. However, Joe mixes things up a little bit and plays the move c3, and at this point we're getting out of our bookwork, we're getting out of our prep, and we're going to have an exciting game where both players are going to have to simply figure out the moves for themselves. We're out of that opening theory already. Now, c3 is a very sound move. The whole idea is quite simple. Black is bringing his knight on this journey over to f6, and once he does, which Vass plays, knight f6, then white can drop the queen back with queen c2. So simply c3 preparing this c2 square for the queen, saying, I really like putting the queen here, and I will be able to eventually maybe put my bishop on d3 and create this nice battery against the h7 pawn. Black continues with the move e6, and this is one of those moves that is very common in the Caro, also common in a lot of French-like structures, but Black is choosing to play with this very sound pawn structure. All of these pawns here, only c6 and e6 have been pushed forward, and everything is very tight and sound and compact. Now, the drawback, of course, is that Black is locking in the c8 bishop. The c8 bishop is not coming into the game at this point because of the move e6. However, there are many positions where this is okay. You'll notice Black, or white rather, has not yet challenged the center. d4 has not been played just yet, even though it will be coming shortly. And because of this, because white has developed a knight, the queen on c2, there's nothing happening very quickly, so it's okay for Black to play in this very solid manner. There's no need to jump, to rush, to try to develop things and throw pieces in a super aggressive manner, because white is not doing anything to gain a lot of time just yet either. So we're going to have a very sound game early on here. Well, white plays the move d4, and now he is taking the center. Black develops the bishop to d6, putting it on an active square, aiming towards white's king side. And white plays bishop d3, and both sides now have these opposite colored bishops on very nice developed squares, aiming at the opponent's king side. b6 is played from Vass, coming up with the idea of simply, well, I played e6 earlier, I'm going to go ahead and develop my bishop either via the fianchetto square, or perhaps even prepare a move like bishop a6 if I play a5 later. Bishop g5 from white, pinning the knight, developing the last minor piece, and also keeping a little bit of flexibility. What I really like with this move, bishop g5, is that white is saying, hey, maybe I'm going to castle kingside, but maybe not. Maybe I'm going to castle queenside as well here. The options are sort of up in the air, so by developing this bishop before committing to a side to castle the king, Black has to keep guessing what's going to happen here, and maybe white can cause Black to create some weaknesses on one side or the other because of this. Well, Black doesn't like this pin, so he's going to put the question to the bishop here with h6. Do you want to maintain the pin on the knight? Do you want to take the knight? Or do you want to retreat the bishop and keep that pin, or retreat it and lose the pin? So white has to decide what's going on here. Bishop h4 is played, maintaining the pin on the knight. And now Black always has the option of these sort of g5 ideas, right? Maybe this is something that will be played in the game, maybe not. It's not necessarily very strong at the moment, because it looks like it leaves a lot of squares weak around the king, but this is an idea that white always has to keep an eye on if Black wants to potentially start storming pawns toward the king side over here. Well, white decides that, you know what, even if this is going to come, there's not enough pressure here at the moment, and Black rather, goes ahead and castles his king, and white does the same thing as well. So both sides castle kingside. And once again, talking about that moment here where g5 was something that was in the air before, after Black castles to the king side, white is probably thinking, you know, it's a lot less likely Black is going to start throwing these pawns at this point, because now his king is going to have a lot of air in front of it, so it's okay for me to go ahead and castle this same direction as well. Very sound opening play so far. White may be a little bit more active with his bishop out on h4 versus the bishop on c8. Both sides have very tight structures. Let's see how the two sides will start to create challenges for each other. Bishop b7, bringing the last minor piece onto a developed square. Rook f to e1. and now bishop to e7 is played. So in this position, what we see from black is that ultimately Vas decided to concede that, you know what, I don't want to relieve this pin with the move g5, and the only other really good way is going to be to bring my bishop back to interpose here so that this pin does not exist anymore. Otherwise, if I move my queen away with a move like queen to c7, then white always has these ideas of potentially taking this knight and ruining my kingside structure, and I don't really want to have to deal with this. It may potentially be sound, it may be defensible and perfectly fine, but it can also be a little bit annoying to deal with the weakness of this h6 pawn. White's going to maybe try to lift this rook, bring it into the game that way. So this would be one way for black to play, to accept the structural weakness of the kingside and try to show that the two bishops have enough compensation. However, Vas decided instead to simply remove the pin with bishop e7 here. So everything, again, very sound in this opening, and white's going to just keep slowly improving the position. A lot of times in these sort of games, it's important to not rush. We want to be able to find some sort of knockout blow. We look at our opponent's position and we say, well, they haven't done anything that active. The bishop's on e7, this bishop's on b7. None of black's pieces are advanced beyond the 6th rank. Everything is sort of back in this passive state. So yeah, I want to break through. I want to find some way to do the punch. But you can't rush things in chess. We got to take our times. We got to slowly build the position, and let's see how that happens and how black will try to create challenges along the way as well. Rook a to d1, simply bringing both rooks to these central squares. Now in these sort of positions, we always have to come up with a plan. Where are we going to be pushing pawns? Where will I try to play? Well, the most straightforward plan for black to get some counterplay would be to try to prepare this move c5, try to break with something like that. So rook a d1 does a really nice job of putting this rook on the same file as the queen and making it hard to play c5 immediately. Black plays queen to c7, moving away from any of these pinning ideas, still defending the bishop, and also potentially preparing c5, so going with these sort of ideas that we say, this dance that's going on. Who's going to try to make something happen first here? Who will potentially create weaknesses for one side or the other? Well, now that there's no more pin on this knight on the h4 bishop, the bishop can go ahead and move because, well, it starts to become a little loose hanging out here on its own. Always has the idea of dealing with g5. Maybe black can move his knight with some discoveries. And so white plays bishop g3, attacking the queen, gaining a little bit of time, and moving that bishop to a more active square. Well, this of course allows black to play bishop d6 as well, so he no longer has to worry about the pin on his knight. And here we see a trade of the bishops. So Joe decided to play bishop takes d6 and queen takes d6. Now, this does a couple things. For one, there's no real threat against this bishop on g3, so there's no rush to have to trade it off. However, what it does is it makes this queen be drawn forward to this e6 square. So remember, we put that rook on d1 where it was nice on the same file as the queen. The queen danced away from it to the c file, and now by taking on d6, we've drug that queen back. So this sort of puts the queen in a little bit of an awkward place, makes it a little harder for some of these c5 ideas to come, and it makes black have to take an extra turn to prepare any of their own active ideas. Now the second thing it does is it clears off a defender of this e5 square, so now white is able to play the move knight to e5, and he doesn't have to worry about black having the option of trading his bishop for the knight if he would want to do that. So knight to e5 is played, white has taken a little bit more space, and we get rook a to d8 from Vas, putting his rook on the half-open file himself, being ready to start contesting those central squares as things look like potentially they could open up. You never really know in these games. Are they going to open up? Are they not going to open up? Is white going to play ideas like c4 and d5? Is black going to play c5? Is white going to try to go for a kingside attack? We still have a very flexible position where we're not entirely sure what the plans are from both sides. A lot of different things could happen. Rook to e3 is played, and this is a move I really like. Anytime you can start bringing these rooks into the attack on the king side, it always looks nice. It always puts a little bit of pressure on your opponent. And of course, not only does this potentially help out with kingside attacking ideas, but this rook is also flexible on this third rank. Maybe white will even play a move like c4 at some point, and the rook could swing even to the queen side eventually at some point. So this is a nice flexible move, and the only downside is it does, of course, disconnect these two rooks. So if the center opens up, maybe there will be some tactics on the d-file. That's the only downside about looking at these moves. That's still far away from happening right now, but rook e3, nice flexible move, which I enjoy quite a lot. Knight d5 is played because, well, if you're going to put your rook on that e3 square, I'm going to go ahead and gain a tempo with my knight, and then rook to g3. And this does beg the question, is knight d5 an effective move for black? Because, of course, it attacks the rook. It looks like it's gaining time. But where do you really want to bring this knight? Well, black's idea is to play knight to f4 here and put the question on white's bishop. So his whole idea was, I'm going to play knight d4, kick your rook, and then bring my knight to f4. And on the surface, this looks like a very sensible idea. This looks like, you know what? This is something which should be simply bringing my knight, improving my pieces, and hey, what are you going to do about your bishop? The problem here is that white has some tactical tries to take advantage of this here, because now this rook is on g3 and there's some pressure going on here. There's a lot lurking in this position, a lot of dangers, and by having taken two moves to move your knight to an aggressive square, also brought your knight away from its better defensive post on f6. And here white misses a chance where white could have taken a shot at black to try to gain some material right away. In the game, we get the move bishop to h7 check, and Joe's idea is I don't want to trade this bishop for this knight, so I'm going to put this check in over here and then go about my normal business, continue my plan after the king moves with king h8. However, what white could try here is a couple different moves, either one of them focused on attacking this knight, and that's either queen to c1 or queen to d2. And the point of this is that after queen to c1, we're attacking the knight and we're saying, hey, what are you going to do with this knight that you just brought to this active square? You can't defend it, because if you play a move like g5, the g-pawn is pinned to the king, and my queen can just take it. So the knight can't be secured on the f4 square. If you retreat the knight back to g6, for example, well, then we can just take it multiple times, get a big attack against the king, win at least a pawn outright, and have a ton of pressure on the king side. So retreating the knight to g6 doesn't look good. When the knight moves anywhere else, like h5, for example, well, now you can play moves like queen takes h6, attacking the knight again and creating mating threats on the g7 square. So this queen is not only attacking the knight, but skewering this pinned square here on h6. So knight moves aren't going to do a lot of good for black. The same thing happens if black plays a move knight takes d3. This looks like the most straightforward idea. I'm taking your bishop, but again, after queen takes h6, how are you stopping the mating ideas that are coming here on g6? There's no good way to defend. You can take the knight and sack your queen, and then you're just, of course, sacking a queen, so that's no good. If you try something like g6, well, I can simply slide over to the h-file, and I'm threatening mate on two squares. Both h7 and g7 cannot be stopped. No way for black to prevent white's victory there. So this move queen c1 has a lot of venom to it. You can't move this knight. You can't defend the knight. So what are you going to do? What's going on? You can't move the knight? You can't defend the knight? Well, white is simply going to be winning something in the end here. The only other ideas would maybe be to try to push something like f6, right? Well, at least if I'm going to lose the knight, I'm going to take this knight over here in return. But even then, after queen takes f4 and f takes e5, black is still getting slaughtered after the move queen to h6. Still too much pressure going on here. The queen is attacking this square, and now the bishop is opened up onto the h7 square as well. Massive attack here for the white pieces. Black has a couple ways to try to defend, but there's no way that he's not going to be losing material and getting attacked very quickly. So, for example, something like rook to d7, you'd have queen h7 check, and when the king comes over, well, now your other rook can take, and everything is going to be breaking through in this position for white. So knight to f4 is actually a mistake in this position. It looks very active. It looks like a good idea. I'm moving my knight, bringing it to the active square, but white has these ideas of queen c2 and queen d2, which completely undermine it and show, hey, your position is busted. Now, this isn't to say that white still doesn't have a lot of danger lurking in the position. So in the game, we do see bishop to h7, and now king to h8 is played. And there's still a lot of these attacking ideas lurking around. One of the big differences, though, is that now with this bishop on h7, the queen is sort of tied down to defending it. So black, in some lines, can give back a piece and be able to take this bishop and maintain some material equality. So Joe goes ahead and continues with the move rook to e1, trying to bring another piece into the game and getting out of the way of any of these pins that could exist here on the d file in some lines. For example, if the queen moves, if white's queen were to move, which it really can't because it's defending this bishop, but there might be some queen takes knight ideas and some back rank mating ideas. All in all, this rook is going to be better placed on the e-file where it can try to lift into the game and help in the fight. Black says, you know what? I need to be wary of the attack here. I need to find some way to make sure all of my pieces are getting involved. And Vass plays the move bishop a6. And the idea here is that this bishop wasn't doing a whole lot on b7, and he needs to find a way to improve it and try to make it do something. Now, the problem with bishop a6 is that black should have gone for the other move, the other idea that we mentioned before. Black's main counterplay idea is the break in this position, and that is c5. And c5, of course, attacks the d4 point. It's going to be attacked 3 times now. White can't really take it. Well, he can now, because at least his rook is defending it, but his knight's been loosened up a little bit, so his rook is tied to the defense. This is another reason for playing rook e1, so that after c5 you can capture the pawn. However, black can simply take it back with the queen, and now has a lot of pressure with this bishop and these queen on the 2 diagonals. Black's position is starting to come to life a little bit. This bishop and knight are both attacking the g2 square. The queen is putting pressure on f2. The rook is preparing to come into the game on the d file. Things are starting to look okay, like maybe black is going to survive and maybe even take over the attack himself. So c5 here is an idea that I really like from Vass. However, not what we get in the game. We get bishop a6 instead, trying to bring this bishop into the game. An understandable move, however, just the wrong way of doing it. c5, definitely the stronger counterblow for the black pieces. Joe plays rook e to e3, preparing to bring this other rook into the game if need be, connecting these rooks on the 3rd. And once again, black has this idea of playing c5 and potentially opening things up, trying to create some lines for his rook and his queen and his bishop. Try to make advantage of the fact that white's king is stuck here on this back rank with nowhere to go. But again, this just wasn't quite what Vass's idea was. Vass had a very different idea in mind and a very tactical idea in mind. And the point here is that, you know what, this knight is on f4, and I've got a little fork that I'm threatening in the air here. And remember, this king is attacking the bishop, and the queen is tied to its defense. So how does it look like black could win material here? What was Vass's idea behind bishop a6? Knight to e2 check, and the point is I'm attacking the king with check, and I'm forking your rook on g3, and I'm going to try to win some material. After the move rook takes e2, and bishop takes e2, which is played in the game, white plays queen takes e2, and remember, the queen was defending the bishop, so now black can play king takes h7. So at this point in time, black is now up an exchange. That's got to be great, right? Things have got to be looking good. Not necessarily so. So in this position, even though white is down in exchange, you'll notice that black has not managed to open up any of these files yet. These rooks, these queens, they're not active. There's not a lot of counterplay going on. That being said, white's pieces are still very active. This knight's honing in on f7, this rook is attacking g7, and if white can play a move that creates enough threats here, he'll have more than enough compensation. In fact, he'll even be winning in this game. So this is a very key moment of this game. Go ahead, pause your videos, take a minute, see if you can find the move. There's only one move. Remember, white is down in exchange. So there's one move in this position for white, which will keep the game winning. White has a winning advantage. Anything else, and it will start to shift black's direction. Let's see if we can find the move which Joe plays. And the point is queen to g4. Creating the battery, it looks very straightforward. We're simply threatening mate on the g7 square. But the problem here is black doesn't have a good way to defend it. If the rook moves over to g8, well, knight takes f7 is going to fork the rook and the queen, along with all sorts of other ideas of queen g6 coming into the position. This looks absolutely lost, busted for black, so rook g8 is not going to be able to defend. And if not rook g8, well, the queen can't get back because the f8 square is covered. The queen doesn't want to sack itself for a knight. That would be a little bit silly here. And you might think to yourself, hey, if queen takes knight, pawn takes, and I've got rook d1, right? Back rank checkmate? Well, remember, the queen is covering the d1 square, so queen takes d1, and this idea does not quite work for the black pieces, as nice as it would be here. So the queen is both attacking and holding this d1 square, a key defensive idea in this tactic. So no defense with the rook, no defense with the queen. Our d8 rook is, of course, completely blocked out. And this really only leaves one more way left to defend the g7 square, and that is with the move g6. And why is g6 not going to be enough to hold the position here? What does Joe play after this for the follow-up in order to finish things up? Knight takes f7. Already down in exchange and sacrificing another piece in order to destroy black's defenses in the position. Same idea as before. I'm forking the rook and the queen, so you have to do something about this. Your queen is under attack, and once you play rook takes f7, no more defender of the g6 square. Queen takes g6 check, and the king forced back to h8, and after queen takes h6, in this position, black resigned the game. And why is that? How does white finish it off? There's only one move here for black. Well, black would have to play rook to h7, and then white is simply going to play queen to f6. The rook cuts off the king's escape to the g file. Rook g7 only move, and then mate on the g7 square with the queen. So very nice attack from Joe Libretto. Very good way of finishing things off. Sacrificing in exchange, losing that, and then still finding that way to break through. Being down in exchange, then sacrificing another piece and busting through in the end in order to play that winning combination. So hopefully you've enjoyed the Game of the Week action. Be sure to come back out. Wednesdays we're having casual chess now at the Southeast Regional Library. On Saturdays, rated events, Pablo Creek Library, rotating between Blitz, dual action, and quick rated events. So be sure to come out, check all of those out, turn your games in as well, and hopefully you'll be featured soon on the Chess for Charity Game of the Week. Best of luck. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, post any comments, and share via the buttons below. Check out our website at chesswithnick.com for further video, more content, and any postings on lessons, further video analysis, or written analysis that you may be interested in. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Chess with Nick, on youtube.com. Have a great day, and wishing you best of luck.